Right everyone, it is Finn here, and yes, it is that time of the year again where every single football YouTuber releases a video that will offend at least half of the platform.
Embarrassing. It's a disgrace.
Of course, I am talking about my 24-25 Premier League predictions. Now, as you guys can see, I do have a tier list set up where I will be placing where I think teams will end the season. Now, I do think it is important to note that obviously the transfer window is still going on.
Here we go.
And many big transfers could still happen. I mean, for all we know, Bournemouth could sign Jude Bellingham and Erling Haaland, and it could change everything. Although, maybe slightly less realistic of an example. But you know what? These are my predictions, and don't forget to put down below your predictions as well. But of course, I think the only way to appropriately start this is with the relegation zone. And I'll be honest here, although maybe I can pick one or two teams, it is a very tricky relegation zone because there's so much quality in the Prem this season. Now, I do think in last place, I'm sorry, I know they've come up and they're going to go straight back down. There will be a yo-yo. It is Ipswich. Now, yes, McKenna did a very good job with them in the championship last year. I think they have brought in quite a few decent signings this transfer window, but nothing that really says, wow, they are definitely going to stay up.
I don't know. I just got here.
And either way, we've seen teams come up, get big players and still go down. Once again, I just haven't seen quite enough from the club to say, yes, they'll definitely stay up, and they will probably end up 20th in my humble opinion, to be honest, in terms of other teams that I think will get relegated. Oh, once again, it's a tricky one, but it's another kind of yo-yo example with Southampton. Now, yes, they were brilliant in the many years that they were in the Premier League. They had top players, but a lot of those players have since left. I think this transfer window, they haven't really done a lot, to be honest. Nothing really to note. I think there are still a few big names that could still leave the club, such as Kyle Walker-Peters. There are talks about him possibly leaving, but at the end of the day, once again, nothing really interesting going in. Obviously, Lallana has re-come to the club from Brighton, although it is said that maybe it could be more of kind of a coaching role as he is a senior player.
How do you do, fellow kids?
At the end of the day, I do think both of these teams will go down, and that leaves the third team to get relegated, which, ooh, this is maybe the trickiest one I've got in this entire list, and I'm going to go for Everton here.
They do this every year. Why?
I'm sorry, I know they are a big club. They did very decent under Sean Dyche, considering the fact that they got point deductions last season. But at the end of the day, they've lost a huge player with the likes of Amadou Onana in their midfield.
And Andre is not even my name, mate.
I think that will be a major loss for them. Obviously, yes, they brought in the likes of Ndaya and Lundstrom. Both of them could be magnificent. They brought in a few other players. But once again, there's only so many times you can kind of just grab it by the skin of your teeth. And I do think Everton this season could go down, although there are one or two other teams that I think I could mention. Now, in terms of other teams that are just going to miss out of the relegation, now we'll be honest, kind of 13th to 17th here, absolutely any order could take place. But I'm going to go for Fulham. Now, once again, they've just lost so many players over the last 2 years. Obviously, with losing Mitrovic last season, I think they did a lot more decently than many people expected. But losing Polina in the midfield and Adebayo, obviously going to Chelsea as well, those are two major losses. A top quality centre-back and obviously maybe one of the best defensive midfielders. Maybe in the league, I would put him in the top 5 there. Although, yes, they have brought Emile Smith-Rowe in, but once again, you just can't depend on an injury-prone player to kind of save you.
He's out of line, but he's right.
But I do think they'll just miss out on relegation. In terms of 16th place, I am going to go for the likes of Wolves. I think, once again, they had some promising moments under Gary O'Neill last year. But yeah, losing Kilmans in your midfield is a major loss. Although, yes, they have brought in youngsters. I'm not really seeing anything that says, yes, they'll improve off of last year. And I think 16th is fair. In terms of 15th, now, this is a team I don't know what to say, really, but I am going for Brentford here. Obviously, they've still got Ivan Toney at the time of talking. Who knows what's going to happen by the end of the transfer window. But at the end of the day, once again, they had some very disappointing moments last season. They haven't really brought anyone that I think will improve the team. They've now lost Raya on a permanent deal to Arsenal. They haven't improved their squad, so I'm not expecting a better result from them in terms of 14th place. I'm going to go for Leicester here, although once again, maybe they could be lower, maybe they could be higher. It is such a tricky team. I mean, this is a club that, 4 or 5 years ago was playing in the Champions League.
In life, always remember that if you chat shit, you get banged.
Obviously, to get relegated. They lost many top quality players. Even this transfer window, losing the likes of Shrewsbury Hall to Chelsea, absolutely huge. I think the Ghanaian Fatawu could do a really decent job for them. But once again, I don't think Leicester City are going to do as well as many people think. They could even do lower than what I'm putting them here. They could be like Burnley from last season. But I am going to go for the Foxes to have an okayish kind of rebound in the Premier League. Now, in terms of 13th place, I'm going for Nottingham Forest. And I will admit that this is a very tricky team to talk about because they are a team that could be 13th or they could very much get relegated, to be honest. Obviously, they've brought in the likes of Milinkovic, who is a top quality centre back. And it's a very weird team because they keep on bringing in lots of top quality, but they don't quite perform as you would expect from some of those players. They have let a lot of those players go. But at the end of the day, they've also struggled with injuries. And I feel like a lot of their top quality players, if they're able to keep in form and if they're able to keep fit, could do a very solid job. Now, kind of moving one tier up. Once again, another very tricky team as I've got Brighton. Now, yes, obviously looking at Brighton, they lost Pascal Gross. That is a huge midfield loss for them.
He's the best football player in the world.
And of course, they lost De Zerbi to Marseille, which is a massive loss. Obviously, a top manager who took them very high up. And we haven't yet witnessed how well they'll do without a top manager like that. So they are very tricky to judge. At the end of the day, they brought in a lot of young players. I think Minters, the player I'm most excited about from Newcastle. But yeah, with the brand new manager, it's hard to tell. I am going to put them in 12th, but we'll see what happens. Next up, I've gone for the likes of Bournemouth in 11th place. A very top team. They did a very decent job last season. I was incredibly impressed with them under Areola. Obviously, Solanke had a top season. If he can perform well again this year, I'd be very impressed. I think they got a few good loans from last season that they did end up making permanent. And once again, it's going to be a very weird season. Them and Brighton, it could go either way between the two of them. Now, jumping into 10th place, and it is a team that maybe could travel or fight for Europe. I'm going for Crystal Palace. Obviously, under new management last year, they did so incredibly well. Yes, they lost Michael Olise, who is a huge loss for the team.
Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry.
But at the end of the day, they are talking about bringing in top players. Obviously, Ismaili Sarr has joined the club, kind of as the winger replacement. Obviously, Kamada, obviously a brilliant midfield signing, a Japanese player who's been performing at a top level for a very top time. I mean, he was in a European final, 2-3 years ago? Once again, I'm very impressed with Crystal Palace, and if they're able to keep on to a player like Eze, for example, I mean, don't forget the fact that Olise was injured for a lot of last year, despite the fact that he is a top player. At the end of the day, yeah, I think Crystal Palace could potentially fight for top of the table once again. Now, jumping into 9th place, this is a team that once again could be 6th place, could be 9th place. Very tough to tell, but I'm going for West Ham United. And what a transfer window they are currently having. Obviously, Max Kilmans has played under the likes of Lepetegu, the manager before at Wolverhampton Wanderers, and I think he's a top centre-back that could do well at the club. Obviously, there are talks at the moment about Fulkrug, obviously a top international striker joining the club, which West Ham United have missed for a very long time. And what a signing that would be, along with Somerville on the wing.
King in the castle, king in the castle.
Once again, West Ham having a very decent transfer window, and I'm going to sneak them into the top 10. Once again, maybe a bit of a tricky one, but I've gone for Newcastle ahead of them. Now, I wouldn't be offended if someone did that, and maybe I will do that for now. Maybe I will put Newcastle 9th, because once again, they had a huge fall off last season after qualifying for Europe. They've got a lot of top players. I think they've had an okayish transfer window, bringing in the likes of Lloyd Kelly, and until anything else happens, I think 9th is a suitable place. Now, kind of jumping into the big dogs, we've got 7th place. These are kind of the players or the teams that could fight for Europe and play in Europe next year. And in terms of 7th place, who do I think is just going to snatch that spot? I'm going for Aston Villa. Now, they've had a very decent transfer window, despite the fact that they lost Douglas Luiz. At the end of the day, they also lost the likes of Diaby, but he wasn't that magnificent, although he was okay. But bringing in the likes of Amadou Onana, absolutely gigantic. There are talks about other top names going to the club. I was very impressed with Villa last year, and I think they could maintain a decent run, although I don't know how Champions League will treat them. And once again, maybe a very similar team. I'm going for Tottenham Hotspurs in 6th place. Once again, difficult to predict them every single year. They could do incredibly well, or they could just kind of spurs things up, you know?
No. He's got a point.
I do think they are in dire needs of ironically, because it's Spurs, dire needs of a very top striker. whether it's Ivan Toney or someone else, they just need a name in there. I know many people are impressed by Archie Gray, but once again, that's not going to be a player who's going to take you from 6th place to, I don't know, top 4. I just don't see it happening, and I do think they are rebuilding at the moment. Now, in terms of that last position, they'll just miss out on Champions League. As you guys can see, I am a Manchester United fan, and I'll admit, I think we would be very lucky to get 5th place, but you know what? I have to back my boys. Obviously, they brought in some decent signings with Xerxes and obviously Yoro as well, picking up injuries once again in pre-season. Hoyland also picking up an injury.
Is what it is. It is what it is.
It just doesn't end. Once again, either of these 3 teams could place in any single order. They are struggling with injuries, but once again, some other top names could still enter the club before the end of the transfer window. And once again, I do think it depends on that. Now, jumping into those top 4 spots, as you guys can see, I've got Chelsea here remaining, despite the fact that they've had a wobbly 1 or 2 years. And I do think they'll enter that 4th place spot.
You serious?
Once again, they did relatively well towards the end of last season. We'll have to see how they do under Maresca, who did a fantastic job last season with Leicester. Once again, very kind of tricky team to judge now that they have new management. But you know what? They've had a decent transfer window, bring in Adebayo. I think he's a top quality centre-back. Once again, very tricky to judge, but I do think they've got the quality there to bounce back. In terms of 3rd place, I'm going to go for Arne Slot's Liverpool. Once again, new manager, we'll have to see how they do. They did well in pre-season, but they haven't really brought in any signings. They've had a very quiet transfer window, and once again, very tricky to judge. They had some ups and downs last season, so hopefully they can bounce back for their benefit. Obviously not for my benefit. We're going to have to see whether Liverpool kind of bounce back under new management and if it's a new successful era. Now, for the top 2 teams, once again, they meet again, Arsenal and Manchester City. Now, once again, absolutely huge debate here. Arsenal, once again, chasing Man City for 2 seasons straight now, but once again, not just quite catching up there. Man City really showing their quality. I do think Arsenal have had a decent transfer window, bring in the likes of Calafiori, although I do still think that they do need a top number 9.
It's been 84 years.
As I said, Man City slipping off once or twice last year. And I really don't know what to go for here. I mean, Savinho being the only real transfer Man City's brought in, but you don't need to change a lot if you did win the league, in my opinion. It could go absolutely either way, but to be honest with you, my gut kind of says that Arsenal could surprise this season. That does sound like a major shock. I do think that there will be champions, and I do think Man City will place 2nd place. Once again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Could be incredibly exciting, but guys, those are my predictions for the 24-25 Premier League season. Don't forget to put your predictions down below. Let me know where you think I got it wrong, and of course, don't forget to subscribe for way more content. Obviously, I've been uploading a lot of shorts lately. You guys seem to be enjoying it, and of course, don't forget to visit Gold Kits if you want a 12% discount on football kits from any of your favorite teams. And of course, they're also running a 3-for-1 special. So of course, check that out. But guys, for FYNN, cheers.